Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News, and today we're bringing a detailed overview of Project 2025 for you to choke on. A Heritage Foundation fever dream so deranged it makes The Handmaid's Tale look like a light workplace comedy. Think of it as a bloodless coup in a binder, a 920-page manual for turning the federal government into a Christo-fascist startup where the CEO is Trump, your HR rep is Elon Musk, and every meeting starts with a loyalty oath and ends in deportation. Crafted by over 400 right-wing ideologues and 140 former Trump officials, which is basically the same as saying over 540 people who think child labor builds character. Project 2025 is a day one demolition plan for the administrative state. You know, boring stuff like keeping your food unpoisoned, your plane uncrashed, and your medication FDA approved. Trump pretended to distance himself from it in public, but let's not kid ourselves. His first 92 days in office have looked like a direct-to-video adaptation of this playbook. Student loans and consumer protection have already been gutted like a dead bear RFK Jr. left in the road on his way to Central Park. Tariff hikes written in crayon and rage, you bet your collapsing supply chain. At its core, this isn't about efficiency or draining the swamp. It's about replacing the swamp with a moat, stacking the palace with sycophants, and drowning the rest of us in deregulation. So get ready for a bumpy ride, because Project 2025 is not just a policy guide, it is an authoritarian vision board, and if we do not rip it apart piece by piece, it is going to turn the last remnants of American democracy into a privatized theme park where the rides don't work and the workers don't get paid.
Brainrot the news.
Part 1. The Heritage Hunger Games. Project 2025 is not a policy plan. It is a hostile corporate takeover of the federal government disguised as a Microsoft Word document. It's Ayn Rand with a PAC and a PowerPoint. It's what happens when you let libertarians, oil lobbyists, and former Trump staffers cook without adult supervision. Unfortunately, they cannot cook. Dreamed up by the Heritage Foundation in a haunted mansion where every room is a think tank for making life worse, Project 2025 is a sprawling technocratic hit list designed to consolidate power, privatize everything, and salt the earth behind them. And on January 20th, 2025, Trump wasted no time getting started. Sworn in for his second non-consecutive term inside the Capitol Rotunda due to weather and presumably divine pestilence, he immediately began implementing this ideological instruction manual. From the moment the Bible hit his hand, the executive orders started flying, and buried behind every one of them was a Heritage Foundation intern with a laptop full of fascism and a LinkedIn page that said America first, DEI last. Donald J. Trump did not just win. He stormed back into office like a high-wire stunt that dropped the ball mid-show, riding a wave of backlash, burnout, and billionaire dark money. This time he brought friends. A Republican Senate, a barely functioning House majority, and a federal judiciary already softened up from round one. Exit polls showed surges in Hispanic voters, white non-college educated men, and a mysterious group labeled Vibecore Gen Z contrarians. The Democrats, meanwhile, had apparently decided to run on quiet quitting, and while the nation froze in sub-zero temperatures, Trump took the oath inside, flanked by Ivanka's gold-plated entitlement and J.D. Vance's hillbilly hatchet face, while outside the Capitol, critics shouted about election integrity, Project 2025, and whether this was still America or just an LLC with nukes. The Heritage Foundation dropped Project 2025 like a lead balloon full of scorpions in April 2023, and by later that year, it had ballooned into a Frankenstein coalition of 100-plus conservative groups, from libertarians to full-blown theocrats. Picture Grover Norquist, Moms for Liberty, and Peter Thiel all doing shots together and drafting federal agency org charts. This wasn't just a think piece, it was a manual for control, down to agency staffing databases, HR templates, and a training program called the Presidential Administration Academy, which sounds like a fake school from an anime where the principal is Ronald Reagan's ghost. They even launched a day one playbook because democracy is when you make a detailed plan to dismantle it before lunch. This is not just a concept, it is Trump's absolute scripture now. He hasn't read it, but unlike the Bible, which he also hasn't read, he's been adhering to Project 2025 precisely. It is not reform, it's revenge. Their goals are to break the civil service, deregulate everything from healthcare to food safety, privatize the Social Security safety net, stack the judiciary, cement executive power, and bury wokeism under a mountain of white paper and white nationalism. This is not conservative governance. This is ideological demolition dressed in khakis and clutching a copy of Atlas Shrugged. Welcome to Project 2025, where limited government means unlimited cruelty and market efficiency means gutting consumer protections. Part 2. Bible of the Bureaucratic Apocalypse. If Project 2025 is the bomb, the Mandate for Leadership series is the blueprint for how to build it, light it, and drop it on every functioning agency in the United States government. Think of it as the Necronomicon of deregulation, a cursed text passed down from Reagan to Trump with one central goal: drown the federal government in a bathtub, then sell the tub to a hedge fund. The first edition released in 1981 and quickly became known as Reagan's Policy Bible because being American Jesus is when you slash welfare and let Exxon rewrite environmental policy. It worked. 2/3 of its recommendations were enacted in year one, including the Economic Recovery Act of 1981, which exploded inequality and launched the modern-day austerity fetish. Since then, the mandate has resurfaced every time Republicans get within spitting distance of the presidency, like a cursed videotape that only plays for sociopaths and khakis. The 1981 Mandate for Leadership wasn't just a guidebook, it was a manifesto in three-piece suits, crafted in the bowels of the Heritage Foundation by people who think homelessness is a lifestyle choice and Medicare is socialism with better branding. It was a plan to yank the wheel of government hard to the right, and it did exactly that. They've been pressing the gas pedal ever since. Every Republican administration since has used the mandate like a cheat code. If you want to destroy an agency, rewrite education to ban books but boost Bible sales, or demolish Social Security, there's a chapter for that. Trump had his own Mandate for Leadership in 2016, a three-part series designed to prep Congress and Trump's swamp creatures for unified conservative rule. Once again, the Heritage Foundation bragged that he had finished 2/3 of the homework they had given him, which is probably more than any one of his teachers could have said. Then came 2023, clocking in at 920 pages. This is the Project 2025 source code, written by hundreds of policy experts who think the Civil Rights Act went too far and OSHA is woke communism. It includes not just policy plans, but personnel lists, loyalty training modules, and a 180-day demolition schedule. It's basically the anarchist cookbook, but for deregulating America into a libertarian dust cloud. From the start, Mandate for Leadership has championed slashing taxes for the rich, defunding every program that helps anyone making under $250,000 a year, deregulating Wall Street and big oil, shredding labor protections, and framing it all as personal freedom. But the 2023 volume goes further. It builds out entire bureaucratic pipelines of ideological loyalty screening for anti-woke hires and training future officials to speedrun government sabotage like as a Twitch stream. By October 2023, the mandate had evolved into a full-blown policy media ecosystem, complete with a keynote by Ron DeSantis, who probably used it to practice his human skin smile while reading aloud from Chapter 7, How to Fire the CDC. Project 2025 is just the latest in a long lineage. Every spreadsheet, flowchart, and fake patriotic slogan in the project traces directly back to this cursed text. Wikipedia describes Project 2025 as being built expressly atop the Mandate series. Critics, including The Nation, Democracy Now!, and every reasonable person with a functioning brain, say the 2025 version makes the 1980 edition look tame. This time, the stakes aren't just budget cuts, they're civil rights, bodily autonomy, judicial independence, and the future of American democracy. This is how it starts. Not with tanks, but with think tanks. And not with brute force, but with a 900-page PDF no one reads until it's too damn late. Part 3. The Four Horsemen of the Bureaucratic End Times. Project 2025 isn't just a manifesto, it's a 4-part bureaucratic death spiral with an onboarding process. Think of it as the Infinity Gauntlet for authoritarianism, 4 interlocking pieces of institutional obliteration, ready to snap half of the federal government out of existence on day 1. It's published, it's been public the whole time, and it reads like someone handed Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and an exorcist a Word document and told them to go nuts. So, let's meet the 4 pillars of the apocalypse. The first pillar is the Mandate for Leadership, their Bible of bureaucratic arson. You already know this one. It's Heritage's 920-page manifesto telling every federal agency how to stop functioning and start kneeling to corporate America. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure, except every ending leads to deregulation. The second pillar is the Presidential Personnel Database, which is LinkedIn but for fascists. This is their MAGAmatch.com, a job board for the far right where any anti-woke warrior with a podcast can apply to dismantle the Department of Labor. No experience necessary. necessary, loyalty a must. Their goal is to purge the deep state and replace it with a shallow pool of sycophants trained to obey instead of govern. Rather than staffing, they're stacking the deck. The third pillar is the Presidential Administration Academy, an online course where incoming officials are trained not how to serve the public, but how to game the executive authority to push through legislation, gut regulations, and avoid congressional or judicial oversight. Instead of a civics class, it's a crash course in legal sabotage. These people are being credentialed in how to break democracy and write the press release after. The fourth and final pillar is the 180-day Day 1 Playbook. Think of it as the to-do list from hell. Dozens of executive orders ready to go the minute the Bible thumps and the hand lifts off the oath. Within 6 months, they plan to fire civil servants en masse, end environmental protections, nuke financial regulations, and restructure every agency to obey the president without question. Democracy does not die in darkness. It dies in bullet-pointed Word documents on day one. I'm going to be blunt. Project 2025 is a war plan, and these are the targets. They want to shred environmental protections, gag the EPA, and declare war on what they call job-killing regulations. Those jobs are in coal, oil, and poisoning the water. Financial regulations like Dodd-Frank will be gone, and workplace safety will be optional. If it protects the public, it is on the chopping block. They're also gunning to gut the Civil Rights Division at the DOJ, weaken anti-discrimination laws, and roll back federal oversight of voting rights and housing justice. They're not being subtle this time around. Their policy is openly racist, openly regressive, and they wrote it down. You can read it. Social Security will be defunded. Everyone on Medicare will be forced into privatized Advantage plans where Advantage means hope you don't get sick. Food stamps, housing vouchers, and unemployment aid will be converted into block grants, allowing states to kill them quietly. In addition, they want to rewrite the Administrative Procedure Act, stripping judges of the power to review executive actions. That means if the president says, shut down the Department of Education, there is no appeal, no checks, no balances, just a CEO presidency with no shareholders, but oil companies and lobbyists. Their trade plan reads like a Twitter meltdown in policy form. Tariff hikes on everything, especially anything made in China, plus withdrawal from the WTO, IMF, and World Bank. Their idea of global leadership is starting a trade war and ghosting our allies. Project 2025 isn't governance. It's executive cosplay for fascists. It's what happens when you give libertarian billionaires a government printing press and no therapist. And if we do not burn the playbook, they will burn what's left of the public sector. Part 4. Governance by gasoline. Within weeks of taking office for his second term, Donald Trump didn't just hit the ground running, he hit it swinging an axe. As of mid-April, his administration has unleashed 129 executive orders in just over 80 days, each one pulled straight from the cold-blooded script of Project 2025. This is not governing philosophy. It's a hostile takeover. Federal agencies are being gutted like fish on a factory line, workers are being purged, and programs that took decades to build are being slashed in hours. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been effectively dissolved. Student loan forgiveness for teachers and nurses is on life support. The NIH is prepping for a budget lobotomy, and foreign aid and international health programs have been frozen and defunded. At the center of it all is just one of the key architects of Project 2025, Russell Vought, who now controls the budget of the entire federal government. So now people like teachers, social workers, EMTs, and anyone who signed up to serve their communities, thinking that in exchange they were promised student debt relief, well, Trump's team saw that promise and ran it through a paper shredder. New memos from the Department of Education suggest thousands of borrowers may be denied forgiveness retroactively under the excuse of policy realignment. Their cruelty isn't incidental, it's intentional. Consumer protection is no more. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was one of the first casualties. Staff were told to pack up, lights were turned off, and over 1,500 jobs were terminated in one fell swoop. It was a targeted assassination of an agency designed to stop banks and lenders from preying on the public. Project 2025 wants regulatory agencies that serve capital, not people, and this was the first step. Global health and humanitarian aid is no more. On January 30th, 2025, Trump officially pulled the United States out of the World Health Organization. Foreign aid programs were paused with no transition plan, leaving famine zones and crisis regions cut off overnight. Children and mothers will die for this stunt, and the administration doesn't care. They see this as draining the swamp. Apparently, the swamp includes polio eradication and clean water. They're using blanket tariffs as a blunt force tool. For a more detailed breakdown, watch our video on the history of tariffs in America. On April 5th, 2025, the administration enacted a 10% tariff on all imports. No exceptions, no warning, no strategic calculus, just a nationalist fever dream written into law. Higher targeted tariffs for trade deficit offenders followed days later. So if your country sends us more stuff than we send back, you're the enemy now. And while regular consumers pay more for clothes, food, and medicine, the administration quietly paused tariffs on high-end electronics, creating a two-tiered tariff regime. Punishment for the poor, privileges for the rich. The State Department now has free rein to raise tariffs up to 25% whenever it feels like, giving political appointees direct control over prices on everyday goods. Then, they went on a multilateral withdrawal spree. We're not just pulling out of the WHO, we're also reviewing funding for the IMF, World Bank, and WTO, all of which Project 2025 sees as obstacles to unilateral power. Global partnerships are being torched one by one in favor of autarky, nationalism, and zero accountability. Science is under siege. In April, the administration proposed slashing the NIH's $47 billion budget by nearly half. That means less cancer research, less Alzheimer's research, and fewer grants for life-saving drugs and vaccines. That money will now be rerouted towards public-private partnerships, which in practice means corporate pet projects and biotech companies with Trump-friendly shareholders. Internal memos outline plans to cut the National Science Foundation's funding by 50% and eliminate EPA research grants wholesale. Environmental monitoring, climate science, and chemical safety have all been deemed non-strategic. In their place, deregulated air, weaponized ignorance, and whatever else the oil lobby can cook up. They have done a personnel coup, where they prefer ideology over expertise. Russell Vought, who we mentioned briefly earlier, helped write Project 2025. Now he's the budget director of the United States. Confirmed by the Senate on January 23, 2025, Russell Vought doesn't just balance the books, he rewrites them. Every agency budget now flows through an ideologue who believes in dismantling the federal government. That's like putting a demolition expert in charge of city planning. The Project 2025 personnel database, launched in 2023, has become the administration's central hiring tool. Deputy secretaries, assistant secretaries, legal counsels, and regulatory officials are now being plucked from a short list of movement conservatives with loyalty as their only qualification. These are not public servants, they are political enforcers, and they're being embedded everywhere. This is not a warning. This is happening right now. Project 2025 is not hypothetical. It is happening. It's working, and it is ripping through the federal government like wildfire. What we are witnessing is the fusion of ideology and state power, a direct assault on democratic governance, civil service, and the notion that government should serve the public good. We are not debating policy anymore. We are fighting off a hostile restructuring of the American state into a blunt instrument of revenge and corporate control, and we've barely hit day 90. Part 5. The End of Government as We Know It. Project 2025 is not a wish list, it is a blueprint for a hostile takeover, a step-by-step guide to replacing democracy with a pyramid scheme where the only thing trickling down is executive power and deregulated sludge. This thing has chapters on how to kill the First Amendment, how to privatize your grandmother's dialysis, and how to fire every civil servant with a conscience. If it were any more brazen, it would be titled Mein Kampf 2. Forget independent judiciary, Project 2025 wants to turn the federal branch into a Federalist Society frat house. No more merit-based vetting, no more ABA guidelines, just raw, unfiltered, ideological loyalty. Don McGahn, Stephen Kenny, and a bunch of dudes named Bryce will hand-select judges to fast-track every draconian law and rubber-stamp corporate wet dreams. They're planning to create 66 new judgeships through the Judges Act so that Trump can appoint over 300 lifetime judges before his second term ends. Expect these robed reactionaries to rule that bodily autonomy is a myth, that corporations are not only people, but better than people, determine that pollution is just the sweet smell of freedom, and treat precedent like an annoying telemarketer they just hang up on. Project 2025 does not want to streamline federal agencies, they want to turn them into job fairs for fascist influencers. The Department of Education will be gone. Homeland Security will be folded into some new dystopian super executive apparatus, probably called something like the Department of Obedience, and 1 million federal workers will be reclassified as at will, then fired unless they retweet Elon Musk twice a day. Head Start will be shuttered, nutrition programs will be privatized, and public services will be obliterated. This is revenge governance, vengeful, petty, and designed to erase the New Deal, the Great Society, and any shred of federal decency. Public sector unions will be outlawed, minimum wage will cease to exist, and discrimination enforcement will be blinded once they defund the EEOC's ability to track racism. They want OSHA gutted, because who needs workplace safety when you're already dying of despair? This is the dream. scheme, a labor force with no rights, no power, and no data to prove they're being exploited. They want the Industrial Revolution, but with worse vibes and no weekends. On top of everything else, the people who scream cancel culture every time a racist loses their sitcom are now planning state-sponsored censorship. Project 2025 wants to dismantle net neutrality so billionaires can throttle your internet unless you subscribe to Patriot TV, reinterpret Section 230 so platforms can be punished for not banning woke content, and give the new FCC chair, Brendan Carr, a Heritage co-author, the power to choke dissent at the source. This is not about free speech, it is about controlling speech, turning the internet into a filtered pipeline of right-wing propaganda, where dissent equals deplatforming and satire becomes sedition. What we're looking at is not policy shift, it's a hostile merger between American governance and authoritarian corporatism. Judges handpicked by zealots, agencies staffed by cultists, unions outlawed, dissent silenced, science defunded, workers made disposable, speech made conditional, and all of it run by a president wielding unchecked power, surrounded by handpicked loyalists, answering to only billionaires and technocrats. Part 6. Executive Overhaul, a Manifesto for Control. At this point, Project 2025 is not a plan. It's a non-consensual restructuring of America with all the subtlety of a boot to the face. It reads like a dystopian manifesto written by a committee of CEOs, televangelists, and unmedicated libertarians locked in a panic room. This isn't about shrinking government. It's about gutting it, stuffing it with cronies, and using it to bludgeon anyone who isn't white, wealthy, or worshipping at the altar of deregulated capitalism. What they want is a unipolar executive autocracy where the only branch of government that matters is the one Trump sits on while tweeting executive orders and sipping Diet Coke. So what's actually at stake? Nothing important, just democracy, civil rights, economic security, the global order, and whether we have breathable air in 30 years. Project 2025 aims to obliterate every constitutional guardrail, replacing the three branches of government with a single gold-plated throne. Congress is being sidelined. Judicial independence is being erased, and agencies with expertise are being fired and replaced with party loyalists. They want to hand over judicial appointments to right-wing super PACs, jam the courts with hand-picked ideologues, and pass legislation like the Judges Act, which would create 66 new seats for future Brett Kavanaughs with less shame and more Twitter followers. Democracy Forward's threat matrix catalogs over 220 ways this playbook seeks to consolidate power, from unreviewable executive orders to emergency powers that never expire. Think of it as a how-to guide for legally installing a dictatorship. Under Project 2025, the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division would be gutted, because you don't need an agency defending your right to vote or exist safely if you're not rich, white, and male. Voting rights protections will be slashed, housing discrimination enforcement will be gone, and surveillance of marginalized groups will be expanded. The ACLU warns that this plan would kneecap every tool we have to fight systemic racism, while greenlighting digital witch hunts targeting Muslim communities, pro-Palestinian voices, trans activists, and anyone who's ever been to a protest or written a Tumblr post. We are looking at a future and present where your internet history gets you deported, your sexual orientation gets you fired, and your race gets you redlined with no legal recourse and no functioning watchdog agencies. Project 2025 is what happens when the ultra-wealthy look at the New Deal and scream, "Reverse discrimination." It is not about cutting waste. It is about making sure the poor stay poor, the sick stay sick, and the working class never unites again. Social Security, Medicare, SNAP, and cash assistance will all see deep cuts. Public sector unions will be outlawed, and OSHA and labor standards will be nuked. A Center on Budget and Policy Priorities analysis estimates 15 million more Americans in poverty under this plan, but at least the billionaires will save on estate taxes while the rest of us die in GoFundMe hospital beds. This is the Heritage Foundation's America, a freedom fetish turned fascist funhouse, where poverty is moral failure and deregulation is divine will. If Project 2025 gets its way, the United States won't just leave the World Health Organization. We'll be yanking funding from the WTO, IMF, World Bank, and probably the UN too. But why? Why would they do this? Because global cooperation makes it harder to act like a drunken hegemon on bath salts. The plan is blanket tariffs that trigger global economic retaliation, exit strategies from every international institution that values human rights, and diplomatic alliances replaced by raw, transactional nationalism. This isn't just isolationism, it's weaponized nihilism, where America becomes a rogue superpower lurching from tweet to tariff while China and Russia divvy up what's left of global influence. The Global Philanthropy Project warns that this retreat will shred global cooperation on health, trade, and climate, and they're being diplomatic. Let's stop calling this a transition guide. This is a playbook for fascism, and every page is a direct threat to life, liberty, and the pursuit of not being fucked over by billionaires. We are talking about the death of judicial independence, the end of civil rights enforcement, the destruction of public services, the rise of executive dictatorship, and the global humiliation of the United States as we spiral into techno-authoritarianism. Project 2025 is the final boss of neoliberal rot, the logical conclusion of decades of deregulation, austerity, and culture war nonsense. Part 7. How to kill a democracy in 900 pages or less. Let's not mince words. Project 2025 is the authoritarian starter kit, a 900-page manifesto from America's most unhinged right-wing think tank that reads like someone bet the Heritage Foundation they couldn't speedrun the fall of the Roman Empire using only PowerPoint and Coke money. This is not policy. This is fan fiction for fascists. It's the wet dream of every Liberty University dropout who thinks OSHA is communism and that public education was a deep state plot to make kids read books with gay people in them. Written by 400 conservative operatives, 140 former Trump officials, and presumably one angry sentient Chick-fil-A, Project 2025 doesn't want to rein in big government, it wants to strangle it, bury it in the desert, and sell off the bones to Raytheon. Already, Trump's second term is rolling out this nightmare blueprint like it's a Costco discount aisle for civil liberties. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is effectively gone, NIH funding has been halved, public service loan forgiveness has been dismantled, and tariffs are threatening to collapse the global supply chains. They want a government run by loyalists, funded by billionaires, and enforced by ICE in tactical gear. They want the judiciary filled with Federalist Society bots who think labor unions are witchcraft, and they want to abolish civil rights enforcement so corporations and police departments can party like it's 1953. This isn't just politics, it is demolition. Project 2025 wants to reclassify civil servants as disposable, ban public sector unions, defund Social Security, and turn Medicare into a coupon for ibuprofen. If it helps the rich and hurts the vulnerable, it is in there. If it expands executive power and crushes dissent, it's not just included, it's featured in bold, underlined, and blessed by Clarence Thomas. And while this administration claims it's just following common sense reforms, the truth is actually much simpler. They are building a government where power flows one way, upward, to white men in suits, to corporations that poison your water, to Christo-fascists in polos, and they're hoping you're too tired, too broke, and too distracted to stop them. But here's the thing, they are wrong. We are not powerless, we are not alone, and we are not going quietly. There are still people fighting back. Lawyers, organizers, whistleblowers, student activists, cafeteria workers, queer librarians, broke poets, pissed off nurses, and everyone else who gives a damn about a future that isn't ruled by evangelical crypto-fascists. So what now? Organize, unionize, agitate, donate, protest, support the ACLU, and boost every lawsuit tying these bastards in knots. Call your representatives until their interns start to sweat. Run for office, march in the streets, and crash their press conferences. Raise hell at your school board, join a strike, and start a co-op. Make fascism inconvenient, loud, unprofitable, and unbearable. Use your voice, your vote, your body, your art, your memes, your grief, your fury, and your love. Because this is not a drill, and these people are not kidding. Project 2025 might have a plan, but so do we, and ours doesn't end with a gulag. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share before they classify this video as seditious content and throttle your Wi-Fi for using the word solidarity.